Welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're going medieval, like full-on time travel back to those awesome universities they had.
Yeah, picture it, like debates raging, super smart people, but their weapons are pure logic. We're
Mhm.
diving into that world,
Yeah.
specifically how they tackled some of the toughest problems in logic ever.
And the cool thing is, these aren't just historical brainbusters. They're problems that, still mess with us today.
That's what makes them so fascinating. We're talking about insolubles. It was their term for these logical paradoxes that kind of exposed, like, the glitches in the system of their thinking.
Glitches that are still around. Our main guidebook for this trip, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on, you guessed it, insolubles.
Couldn't ask for a better map. So to really get into this, we have to understand something about medieval peeps. For them, logic wasn't just some abstract thing.
Right, it wasn't just like a game for them.
It was totally woven into, like, everything. Their understanding of God, the universe, the natural world, all of it.
So these insolubles, these paradoxes, they weren't just like, ooh, fun brain teaser.
They were huge GE, like shaking the foundations kind of stuff.
Okay, so what are insolubles exactly? What makes them so paradoxical?
Well, the most famous one, I bet you've heard it, is the liar paradox. That whole "this statement is false" deal.
Oh yeah, the one that makes your brain melt a little.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because if it's true, then it has to be false. But if it's false, then it must be true. It just creates this, like, inescapable loop of self-contradiction.
It messes with the core of how we think about truth and language.
Big time. And the medieval folks, they didn't shy away from this at all. They came up with some wild examples of insolubles, really pushing it.
Oh yeah, they got creative with it for sure.
Big picture this. The oath breaker. He makes this big vow to break his oath.
Talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. So if he keeps his oath, he's breaking it. But if he breaks it, he's keeping it. Paradox City.
It's like a paradox built on the very idea of a promise.
Exactly. Or how about this? Socrates. They loved using him in these examples. So he's told if he lies, punishment's coming.
And being Socrates, he can't resist a good philosophical showdown, right?
Of course not. So what does he say? You will throw me in the water?
Boom. Philosophical mic drop. It's like he's forcing their hand. Either way, they prove him right.
Right. So these examples, they weren't just playing around. They used these situations to dig into the limits of language and meaning, even how we, like, act in the world.
Yeah, it gets deep fast.
Hmm.
So the big question is, how did they try to solve these things?
Ah, now that's where the journey gets good. We see all these different ideas pop up, each solution with its own pluses and minuses. It's like watching intellectual history unfold.
I'm ready. Let's start with the early approaches.
Hmm.
How did they first try to tackle these logical beasts?
One of the early moves involved tying insolubles to this idea from Aristotle, the fallacy of secundum quid et simpliciter.
Oh yeah, I vaguely remember that from my philosophy days, but a little refresher would be great.
Totally. It's about this difference between something being true in a specific way, that's the secundum quid part, and being true absolutely the simpliciter, like saying, this feather is light.
Okay, so light in terms of weight, not like color, right?
Exactly. So it's true if you mean weight, but false if you mean color.
The truth depends on how you're looking at it.
Exactly. Context matters. So some medieval thinkers applied this to the liar paradox, and they're like, maybe it's true in one sense, but not in another. Like maybe it refers to a past lie, making it true in that moment, but overall it's still false.
Feels a bit like dodging the real issue, though.
You're right to be skeptical. It doesn't really solve the heart of the contradiction. So other solutions came up. One that's really interesting is called transcasis. This one said the liar paradox hinges on, like, a time shift.
The time shift, like Doctor Who style.
Not quite that dramatic, but yeah, like a change in time. They
Okay.
said when someone says, I am lying, they really mean what I just said was a lie.
Ooh, sneaky. So they're shifting the target of the lie.
Precisely. Separating the act from the statement.
Clever. Were there any other, standout solutions from this early period?
Well, some went even further. They suggested maybe lying, and the content of what you're saying, they happen on different levels. Like you could unconsciously be telling the truth while saying you're lying.
A subconscious truth teller.
Yeah.
That's trippy. But kind of hard to prove, right?
Yeah, it raises all these questions about what lying and truth even mean.
It sounds like these early thinkers were in deep water trying to, chart this uncharted territory.
Totally. And each attempt just revealed how complex these things really are. But, as we'll see, the later medieval folks, they took all these ideas and ran with them, developed even more elaborate theories to try and tame these paradoxes.
I'm ready for round two. But before we go there, any first impressions, anything jumping out at you about these early approaches?
Well, I'm struck by, their dedication to logic. Even if a solution felt iffy, they kept at it, trying to make sense of these really tricky problems. That's pretty impressive, right?
Absolutely. It shows a real commitment to understanding the power and the limits of human thought.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder what kind of logical puzzles they'd be wrestling with if they were around today.
Oh, I'm sure they'd be all over the internet debating memes and the paradoxes of social media algorithms.
Totally. But for now, let's stick with their world and see how those later medieval thinkers took on these challenges. Stay tuned for part 2, where things get even wilder. So those early attempts, they kind of set the stage, right? But the 14th century, that's when things get really interesting. Boom, a surge of brain power, especially at Merton College, Oxford.
Morton College, that's like Logic Central back then, right?
Oh, yeah. Think of it like the Silicon Valley of medieval logic, super intense, tons of innovation. And one of the big names from that scene, Thomas Bradwardine. This guy's work on insolubles, it was a game changer.
Okay, I'm ready for the Bradwardine revolution. What made his approach so different?
Well, he starts with truth, right? But he's super strict about it. For Bradwardine, a statement is only true if it signifies exactly how things are. No more, no less. He called it signifying as is the case.
So no wiggle room, no poetic license, just straight up facts.
Exactly. But here's where it gets wild. Bradwardine said insolubles, those tricky paradoxes, they actually signify more than they seem to at first glance.
Wait, hold up. How can a statement mean more than what it, actually says?
Because, he realized, statements don't just signify the immediate facts, they also signify all the things that logically follow from those facts. It's like a chain reaction of meaning.
So, if I say the sky is blue, I'm also implying there's a sky, there's a concept of blue, all that.
Got it. So Bradwardine applied this to insolubles. He said because they imply their own falsity, they end up implying their own truth, too.
Okay, I need a sec to process that. So because the liar paradox says this statement is false, to make that claim work, it actually have to be true.
Boom, you got it. And a statement can't be both true and false at the same time, right? That's like logic 101. So Bradwardine's conclusion, insolubles gotta be false.
That's a slick move, using the paradox's own logic to, dismantle it.
Exactly. And this was huge because it highlighted how interconnected meaning is. Even a simple statement can have, hidden depths, you know?
It also seems way more elegant than just saying, well, self-reference is banned. Something.
Right. It tackles the problem head on. And of course, this sparked all sorts of debate. Another Merton guy, Walter Seagrave, he wasn't so convinced.
Oh, what was Seagrave's issue with Bradwardine's idea?
He thought insolubles don't actually signify more than they seem. Instead, he said, they're doing this other sneaky logical thing, the fallacy of accident.
Flashback to Philosophy 101 again. Remind me, what's that fallacy all about?
It's when you take a general rule and apply it to a specific case where it, doesn't fit. Classic example. Birds can fly, penguins are birds, therefore penguins can fly.
Except penguins, not so much with the flying.
Right. Exceptions exist. Seagrave said insolubles pull a similar trick. They shift the meaning of words as you go, leading to a messed up conclusion.
So the meaning of falsehood or statement could change mid-paradox, and that's how they trip us up.
That's the idea. They're messing with language itself.
Fascinating. So Bradwardine's all about the content of what we mean. Seagrave's more about the consistency of meaning.
Nailed it. Different angles on the same problem. Then enter Roger Swinesht, another Merton guy. This debate was getting heated.
Okay, what did Swinesht bring to the table? How did he mix things up?
He agreed with Bradwardine on one thing. Truth isn't just signifying as is the case. He said a true statement also can't, contradict itself.
Makes sense. So the liar paradox, it fails that test right off the bat.
Exactly. But then Swinesht got radical. He's like, okay, insolubles, they're false because they contradict themselves, B-U-T. They can still signify how things are.
Hold on. Are you saying he thought false statements could still reflect reality?
Yep. He said even though they're ultimately false, they can still be part of a logically sound argument.
That's mind-blowing. Falsehoods leading to truths. The medieval mind was wild.
Totally. And he didn't stop there. Swinesht even claimed that with insolubles, two contradictory things could both be false at the same time.
Whoa, that's like challenging the core of logic itself, the principle of non-contradiction.
That's Roger Swinesht for you. Pushing boundaries, questioning everything. His work really makes you rethink truth and falsehood and how they relate.
It's amazing how these medieval guys were wrestling with questions that still baffle philosophers today.
I know, right? Like, we're still debating these ideas centuries later. Their insights are so relevant to language, logic, the whole shebang.
And it's not just theoretical. Understanding these paradoxes helps us, think more critically about the world around us.
Absolutely. And the story's not over yet. We've got to talk about another Merton heavyweight, William Hadesbury. He had a completely different take on insolubles.
Okay, lay it on me. What was Hadesbury's approach?
This guy, he was all about precision, context, the nitty-gritty details. He said insolubles are only paradoxical under very specific conditions. He even had a term for it, the casus.
So, the exact circumstances of the statement matter.
Big time. He believed how a statement signifies depends on the situation it's uttered in.
So instead of one big solution to all paradoxes, he's saying, hey, let's zoom in, look at each case on its own.
Exactly. It's a more practical approach, less about abstract rules, more about how language actually works in the real world.
Did this catch on? Did other thinkers follow Hadesbury's lead?
Oh yeah, his work was super influential. It shaped the debate for a long time, leading to even more refinements and new ideas in the late medieval period.
So this medieval logic saga, it's still unfolding. What other twists and turns await us as we head into that late period? So we've journeyed through early attempts at tackling insolubles, and then those Merton College guys really shaking things up. They were all trying to make these paradoxes fit into their understanding of logic. But I'm guessing the story doesn't end there.
Not a chance. The late medieval period, it got even more intricate. Thinkers were building on what came before, getting super nuanced. One figure who stands out in this era is John Wycliffe. Now, he was a controversial theologian, to say the least, but his work on logic is undeniable.
Okay, Wycliffe the logician. What did he bring to the table in terms of insolubles?
Well, he went multi-layered. He came up with this theory of truth with, 3 different levels, trying to explain how an insoluble could be both true and false, but in different ways.
3 kinds of truth. All right, I'm hooked. Explain it to me.
So first, you've got transcendental truth. Basically, anything that exists is true just by existing. It's super broad, more about being than about statements being right or wrong.
So, the universe exists, therefore it's true. Kind of a given.
Exactly. But that doesn't help much with insolubles because it doesn't deal with contradictions.
Right. Too big picture.
Yeah.
What are the other 2 types of truth, then?
The second one is more focused. A statement is true if what it signifies, what it points to, actually exists. He called these things primary significates. Not physical things, more like abstract concepts, beings of reason.
So, the underlying facts a statement is trying to get at.
You got it. If that fact doesn't exist, then the statement is false in this second sense. But here's the kicker. Wycliffe adds a third sense of truth. A statement is only true if its primary significant exists and it's independent of the statement itself.
Okay, now we're getting to the paradox territory. I can feel it. What's this about independence?
Think of the liar paradox again. This statement is false. Even if that primary significant exists, like the fact that it's false, it's not independent of the statement itself.
Because the statement's truth relies on it being false. It's a closed loop.
Exactly. It fails the independence test, so in this third super strict sense, it's false. But in the second sense, it's actually true.
Wait, what? It's both. So that's Wycliffe's solution, having multiple truths.
That's it. He's not saying paradoxes aren't contradictory. He's saying they can be true or false, depending on which truth you're talking about.
That's pretty clever, actually. Not just dismissing them, but explaining the different levels at play.
Right. It's way more nuanced than just saying insolubles are meaningless or trying to ban self-reference altogether.
It's like he's mapping out the different layers of how we use and understand language.
Right.
So Wycliffe set the stage for others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who came after him in this late period?
Well, one thinker who took Wycliffe's ideas in a really interesting direction was Peter of Ely, a cardinal and a big name in theology, but he was also a logic nerd.
Theology and logic, that's a powerful combo. What did Peter of Ely add to the mix?
He liked Wycliffe's multi-layered truth, but he brought in a psychological angle. He said the reason insolubles mess with us so much is that they map onto 2 mental propositions, not just one.
2 different ways of thinking about the same statement, even if it's just one sentence.
Exactly. He's using this idea of mental language, going all the way back to Aristotle. The idea is, in mental language, meaning is fixed, no ambiguity, unlike our spoken or written words, which can be all over the place.
So how do insolubles fit into mental language then?
Peter of Ely said, when we hear or read an insoluble, Our minds actually form two separate thought statements, mental propositions. One reflects what the statement seems to say, the other is about its self-contradiction.
So with this statement is false, our mind is also thinking, well, if it claims to be false, doesn't that make it true? Something like this.
Exactly. And these two mental propositions, they clash. That's why we get that flip-flopping feeling with paradoxes, our minds trying to make sense of two incompatible things.
That's a really cool insight. It's not just logic on paper, it's how our brains actually process these weird statements.
Totally. It highlights the connection between language, thought, and how paradox works, not just as a logical puzzle, but as something we experience.
It's wild how these medieval thinkers, from the early guys to Wycliffe and Peter Ravelli, they were onto things that are still relevant today. Exploring truth, meaning the limits of what we can even know.
They really were pioneers. And what strikes me is their, boldness. They didn't shy away from paradox. They dug in, saw it as a chance to understand more about thought itself.
It reminds us that real knowledge isn't about easy answers. It's about being willing to explore, even if it gets messy, even if it seems contradictory.
Well put. And who knows, maybe some of our listeners will be inspired to pick up where these medieval folks left off. There's still so much to explore with these logical puzzles.
Absolutely. So to all our listeners, keep those minds sharp, keep questioning, and don't be afraid of a little paradox now and then. Until next time.